and welcome to Stylish Chats with Creatives. Today on the podcast, I'm speaking to Jack Graham. Jack lives in Manchester and owns Racoon on the Run video production and editing company. I've said that right? Editing company?
Editing Limited.
Editing Limited.
Editing Limited. It's a bit of a mouthful. I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, that's why I was getting a bit tongue-tied there. How are you doing?
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, very happy to be on. Yeah, very exciting. I think it's the first time I've been a podcast guest, if I remember right. So that's fun.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome to
Thank
probably the most chill podcast that there is.
Brilliant. It sounds like a good one to start with.
Definitely. So we actually met on LinkedIn. I feel like you reached out when I'd put like an advert out for podcast guests, and I was like, bit your hand off for it. I was like, yes, please come on. I love finding out about new people who I've never met before. So it's kind of, I feel like we should have crossed paths. I feel like you've got a familiar face, but I don't know where we maybe have crossed paths. It's one of those, isn't it? Because Manchester's so small in the creative industry.
Yeah, a lot of people say that, and I'm never quite sure if I've just got one of them faces or I just talk to a lot of people, come across a lot of paths, and just have like a rubbish memory. Like whenever I'm out and about in the Northern Quarter or something, and I maybe run into people but don't remember. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, when you're a freelancer as well, you go into a studio or you go and work with people, and you're the only person who's maybe a freelancer, and everyone knows your name, and then you forget all of theirs because you've got 50 names to remember.
Literally, yeah. That is the deal usually.
I can often remember that people have got dogs or like a cat or a pet and just not their names. Yeah,
I'm remembering the pets often. I usually remember if I enjoyed working with somebody's face, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, I remember that person's face, and I remember they were great to work with. Everything else out the window.
Yeah. I'm with you on that as well. I'm with you. I'm like, that face looks familiar in a good way.
Yeah, and then some. I mean, unfortunately, you remember even more when it's like, oh, I remember them. They're a fucking nightmare.
Yeah. Avoid the red flags coming out.
It's like a survival thing, maybe. Like an evolutionary thing.
Yeah, like a fight or flight, maybe.
Yeah.
So, how did you become a videographer?
All right, so I'll start. So basically, post-COVID, towards the end of like COVID and everything, I used to be a street fundraiser, like them people who stop you in the street and say, "Hey, you look friendly." I'd done that since I'd left uni. I didn't study anything to do with videography at uni. I did engineering as my bachelor's.
Wow.
Yeah, and then did a master's in international disaster management. As I always say, I'd been managing my own life for a while, so I thought, let's take it internationally and do national disasters as well. And,
That's hilarious.
So I worked for a big like major charity doing that in-house for a long time, and it was good. You got to like talk to a lot of different people. Gives you a really, really thick skin, which actually translates so well into freelancing, and also makes you pretty good at sales and getting people to buy what you're selling, basically. I mean, if you can convince somebody to give X amount a month for no tangible benefit to themselves, then it's not too hard to sell video services usually. So yeah, I'd done that. Then obviously COVID wiped that industry out completely. I think it's kind of starting to recover, but obviously not a good disease for street fundraisers.
Yeah.
And yeah, as that was kind of winding down a little bit, I thought, right, okay, let's go traveling and work out what the hell I actually want to do for the rest of my life. So I flew to Romania, which was like one of the only like green countries as it was at the time when the whole like yellow, red, green thing was on. Flew to Romania, spent a week in Bucharest, and then went to this little town called Brasov where I encountered I can't remember his name now, a young fella. He was making YouTube videos. He was only like 18. And he was making YouTube videos, and I was in a few of them, just like travel vlog type things. And he was like, "Oh, you're really good on camera. You should be a YouTuber." And I was like, "I don't want to be a YouTuber. I don't like that idea at all." But what I do quite like the idea of is being a bit of a Louis Theroux type figure. I actually, at the time, sounds really arrogant, but I was kind of like, combine Louis Theroux and Hunter S. Thompson, and that is what I want to be. And so I basically just bought a camera. I'd lost my dad over COVID, so I had some inheritance to kind of like buy some camera gear and everything. And that is actually how I ended up setting up the business in the end as well. And so I bought a camera. It was like an £800 DSLR or something, and just started filming stuff like basically filming myself doing things and like filming dogs in the street and stuff. Because when I say I had no experience with cameras at all, I mean I had no experience with cameras at all. I didn't know what the exposure triangle was. I didn't know what shutter speed was, like anything. Read a lot of books. I watched some videos. I did like a few video courses on like how to edit and that kind of thing, but a lot of it was through books, because I'm quite a book type person, I guess. And yeah, just through experimenting, and then eventually I got to a point where I was like, okay, I wouldn't be totally embarrassed to try and make something proper now. So I was just in the street in this little town, and I saw this busker, and he had like one of them foot drums where there's like two pedals on it,
Yeah.
and a guitar, and he had Captain George tattooed across his chest, which was his like performance name, and he wore a captain's hat. Yeah, so that's how I met Captain George, and he was Slovakian, and he'd been basically traveling and busking for the past like 8 years. He'd spent COVID in Japan. He was just recently back in Europe. And I dropped him a message on Instagram and said, "Do you want to make a documentary about Captain George?" And he didn't reply. I get the feeling this guy didn't really check his messages very often. Quite a chaotic chap. And as it happened, I actually just wandered into a bar at like 2 a.m. the next night, after having just been sat outside reading a book, having a beer, and I went for last orders, and there he was, sat there right at the bar. So I was like, "Oh, hi, you Captain George?" And he says, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh, well, I dropped you a message on Instagram." I explained the whole thing, and he's like, "Oh my God, a documentary about Captain George. That is so badass, so rock and roll." And he's like, "Okay, if you're going to make this documentary, we leave at 7. And I'm like, "Okay, like 7 tomorrow evening?" And he's like, "No, in 5 hours, you have to stay up all night with me." That is how you prove that you're good enough. And yeah, so he stayed up all night and got on the bus the next day, like just took off, went and got my stuff from the hostel. And I think that was like a bit of a baptism of fire of whether I was like worthy of making this documentary. And so we spent like about 10 weeks traveling around Romania, Moldova, went into Ukraine like pre-war, about 3 months pre-war, then back into Slovakia again. And ended up with a 25-minute documentary, which, while absolutely rough as all boots and far from the finest work you'll ever see, is not boring, which is like my number one thing. As long as something isn't boring, you've basically not lost. You might not have won, but as soon as something's boring for me, it's like, okay, well, this sucks. Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
So yeah, I was pretty happy with it. It did get some like obscure award at an obscure festival in I think it was in Slovakia. I guess because from home turf, they must have quite liked it. So that was really good. That kind of like showed me the ropes and all the perils as well of video, like how important audio is and light and all that kind of stuff. And even just like the boring stuff, like backing things up, for example, media management, all that kind of stuff. I went back into fundraising for a bit and went in as a manager for this charity, like managing the fundraising operation, trying to start again. But I think after I'd done that, after I'd kind of like had this idea of doing something else with my life, I just couldn't handle the whole thing anymore. Like for some reason, I didn't used to mind being ignored and told to fuck off all the time. But suddenly after doing something like that and taking a bit of a break from it, suddenly it really bothered me, and I was like, who the fuck do you think you're ignoring? And I was like, you can't really do that job if you have that attitude.
Yeah.
So yeah, while I was kind of trying to hold that down, I ended up making another documentary about a homeless guy who I shared a pitch with. Basically, we were both kind of begging, just with different methods, I suppose. And he'd have a good chat, and I'd always get him a coffee and stuff. We'd known each other for like 4 years. So I said, "Hey, do you want to make a documentary?" And he actually predicted I was going to ask him that before I even asked him. And he said, "Yeah, on one condition, that it's not one of these films that's just like, oh yeah, there's a homeless guy there. Look how shit his life is. Yeah, being homeless looks really hard, doesn't it?" And you come away from it and go like, "Yeah, being homeless looks shit. I've not learned anything." And I said, "Yeah, that's actually what I was going to say. Is I don't want to make that film because that film's been made like 4 times in Manchester alone in like the last 20 years.
Yeah.
It's totally pointless." So we made it about. It ended up just being about one night. It's super colourful, bright colour palette, quite funny in places, really kind of humanising. And yeah, not just about how hard it is, about like how people are still humans and how they still have friends and have a laugh and like go on adventures and stuff, and have passions, and hopes and dreams and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, that didn't do anything at any festivals, which is a little annoying. I think it was because it just didn't really have a great kind of story behind it. It ended up as just being a bit of an extended interview in the end. But nonetheless, I think it was worth doing, and it taught me a lot as well. Continue to learn. And then about a month after I finished editing that, I was just completely done with charity fundraising and thought, you probably don't know enough to start a freelancing business in video, but fuck it, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And just went for it. Registered the company, came up with Racoon on the run. I'd like to say there's a great story there. It literally popped into my head, and I was like, that's a good name. just out of the blue. And and I kind of knew that the logo would be all like bright pink. Honestly, it all just kind of came to me in a dream. I've never had that happen before.
That's
but it
cool.
literally just popped in my head, yeah. And a lot of friends actually said like, oh, do you not think that's a little bit childish, that branding? Because for anyone who's not seen it, which I guess is most people, it's a little raccoon like jumping out, like a cartoon raccoon jumping out of the camera with like a big pink spotlight behind it. And a lot of people said, like, do you not think that's a bit childish for, a professional videography company? And I said, well, no, I think people are going to remember it. And I think it's something that sticks in the mind. And also, I'm quite childish sometimes, so it fits.
I think sometimes you've just got to do some fun stuff that kind of just sticks with people. Like, it's great being serious, but also if you're a bit tongue-in-cheek, a bit fun anyway, they kind of, like, the people you want to come to you are going to come to you because they also want something fun and like a little bit cheeky and not the usual. So it makes sense. And I think like with my branding, I was like on this t-shirt, it's like a handwritten like signature type thing. And then when I did my van, I was like, that's going in glitter because why not? Like, it's fun. Like,
yeah,
if I make it all serious, that's not fully who I am. Like, it needs to show a bit of personality. The right people will come.
Yeah, you don't want to have like a disconnect between what people expect when they see all your branding and your website and everything, and then they jump on a call with you or something, and you're just nothing like that at all.
Yeah,
that's going to be really like just discordant and not really work. And a big part of it as well as I thought, I found from like speaking to people that before I'd even started the business or anything, that a lot of people who knew that they probably should be using video and commissioning video for the business actually just found the whole thing really intimidating, and it felt like they were expected to know what they wanted and what the process was and what was expected of them and everything. And I think that's not helped by like a really serious brand. Whereas if it's something that's obviously like a little bit fun, it's just so much more approachable, and that's actually borne out as well in the kind of clients I get. It's a lot of people who've never commissioned video for the business before, kind of taking a plunge with it, which I love. It's great working with somebody and kind of making them realize, hey, this isn't actually super painful. And actually being in front of camera isn't that horrible. I mean, some people still come away thinking it's horrible, but at least you get something good out of them anyway. Making that whole process not so bad. Yeah, where was I? Yeah, so I started the business, and at first, obviously, you're sort of just working with anybody you can. Doing full projects for like £100 just to build a portfolio, doing stuff for free for family and friends and all that kind of thing. And I still had some runway left from like inheritance money. I hadn't quite spent it all on camera equipment and holidays yet. And so that was obviously really, really helpful, which just meant that I had a bit of runway to play around a bit more. And yeah, since then, it's kind of like the start of this year, it got to the point where it was like truly self-sustaining. And then kind of like the midpoint of this year, it started to really, I'd say, be successful. I mean, I'm obviously the video won't be in the podcast, but I'm using air quotes right now when I say successful, because like, how do you define that even? Everybody's got a different way of doing that.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. It's like everybody's definition of success is completely different, and like you can be in the same job and literally have like the same kind of life, and your range of success will feel different to other people. And I think like, I don't know how you feel, but for me, success is like, okay, I've paid like for my mortgage, the dog's fed and watered, like I've had decent food, I've afforded like a couple of takeouts, like we've had a couple of holidays, like it's not, oh my God, I'm earning like £6 million a year. Like,
yeah, I'm with you.
know, and I think people have that different definition, which is perfectly fine as well. But like for you to feel that you're successful within 3 years?
So it'll be coming up on 2 years in November.
That's insane. That's
Thank you.
congratulations, because that's really testament to showing how people have taken to your business, because it can take a decade to feel like that. And that's insane.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I feel really good about it, to be honest. It's one of them things. I think I'd never really found a thing that I'd done where I was like, yeah, I'm super happy with that. I was one of them really overachieving kids who, hit uni and then went, oh, actually, life's really hard and I can't just coast anymore. Then just spent like my early 20s kind of floundering around, wondering what the fuck I was doing. And God, I've wasted all that talent that I had as a kid and my disappointment, etc., etc. And but then you do something like this, and I think honestly a big part of that defining success for me as well, and I think most freelancers probably feel this, is it's not necessarily just about the money. It's about being able to define your own schedule and not have a boss, and decide if you want to go in a different direction with what you're doing, you just need to make that happen somehow. And you can look at that new direction and think, I have no idea how to do that. But I think once you've done it once and you've started freelancing once, you can kind of think, okay, I have no idea how to do that right now, but there's no reason I can't have an idea of how to do that in a week, in 2 weeks, if I talk to the right people and, just find out, basically.
Yeah, you're so right. And I think sometimes, I mean, that never changes with freelancing. I feel like still to this day, like however many years I've been freelancing, I think I've lost count now. There's still jobs where I go, yeah, okay, I'll do that. Not entirely sure how I'm going to do it. And then get on it and just go, yeah, okay, cool. I've like figured it out, like problem solved in a completely different way to the traditional way of problem solving, if you will. And I think that then also keeps your creativity flowing, I think, because then you're fixing things in a different way and you're kind of approaching things in other ways that you maybe wouldn't have approached had you not have taken that job, and building your network up to have people who can help you out as well is huge.
Yeah, the networking side of it is something that I really wish I'd jumped on quite a lot sooner. I didn't really start doing it until the start of this year, and I'm really not sure why, because I'm a really sociable person. I think there's an element of my imposter syndrome was just too high, having started a business with really no experience. It's not like I'd worked at a video studio for a while and then gone freelance. I was really flying by the seat of my pants for a really long time. And yeah, I think there's this feeling that if you start networking, well, I think I had this now I think back. If I start networking now, I might get found out. People might realize.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that fucking imposter, honestly, that can be kicked off a cliff. Honestly, it catches all of us. Oh.
Yeah, I feel like literally now that I've kind of opened up about it and have kind of got more of a network of other people in the same position, I think pretty much everybody has that. If I ever find somebody who doesn't, I'm going to definitely look at them a little bit side on.
Yeah.
How do you exist?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever met somebody who doesn't have imposter syndrome. And like, even people who I deem like really successful people still have it. I think it's just that kind of like keeping yourself in check kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's also an element of if I feel like now if I ever lost it, I'd wonder why. I'd wonder if I was like maybe not pushing for the next thing enough. I get very easily bored. And I think if I ever kind of lost that slight imposter syndrome, I'd probably think, oh, am I also bored? And I think the answer would usually probably be yes.
Yeah. And I think that's like seeking a bit of discomfort actually like makes you kind of keeps you on your toes, and actually like it's not necessarily a bad thing. And like you, like I get bored quite easily, and like it's nice to chop and change different studios or like go and see different people and like do different projects, not necessarily all at the same time, but it's nice to kind of keep just faces fresh. And like sometimes you are just on boring jobs for like weeks, which is fine, but if the faces are fresh and you're like, oh okay, I'm going to see like Bob this week and like George next week or whatever, it's kind of, you keep thinking like, oh okay, cool, I get a bit of interaction that's different from last week. But I do think as creatives, I think we often we get bored quite easily.
Yeah, I think that's probably common to most
Hmm.
creative type people. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just intrinsic to being creative generally.
Yeah.
It's a funny phrase that, isn't it? A creative.
Yeah.
Like we all know what it means, and it's a useful phrase to have. But I always just think it's quite a funny one as a bit of an aside. But yeah, I think the getting bored thing definitely is quite common. Even when I'm taking on various different jobs, there's always like this niggling thing in the back of my mind. Like that's what it is. I always think, are you going to be doing this forever? Is this your life now? Is this your life now? Is this it?
Yes, I get that all the time.
Yeah,
All the
really,
time.
really.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm like, but it's not to say that like I hate what I'm doing,
Oh
because
no,
I
not at
don't at
all.
all. But I'm like, am I okay with doing this for the next 30 years?
Yeah. Literally, literally. Like, will this be what's on my gravestone?
Yeah. Like, will I just be doing hanging kids' clothes for 30 years? Is that, I'm quite happy doing it right now. But I think as well, it's like kind of just being like happy in the moment and being like, I'm cool with it right now. And obviously it's probably going to change and it's probably going to evolve and adapt. And you don't know, there might be another pandemic. You don't know what's going to be thrown in that's out of your control, that you just kind of plod along. It'd be lovely to think that I was still doing it in 30 years, but I might not be. It might not even be here,
Mhm.
but you have
Yeah,
that
that's
kind
it.
of,
Could get it by bus tomorrow. You never know, do
yeah,
you?
let's just hope I'm wearing matching pants and bra.
Indeed. I'd say me too, but hey, you never know, do you?
But yeah, it's funny. It's funny how imposter just gets like that, and how like we all actually feel a little bit the same, which I think is kind of comforting as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think once I realized that most people feel that way, I was suddenly happier to go and put myself out there a little bit more. Because I also get it with any work that I ever do as well. I look at it and I send it away, and even if the client comes back and says this is amazing, I love it, I'll look at it and you can just see that one thing you don't like about it, can't you? You can always just see that one thing that will just niggle with you forever. And I feel like I've got that about almost everything I've ever done. But then I have to remind myself that that's only because I was the one that made it. Most people would look at that and go, yeah, awesome.
I think that's kind of like an artist way of thinking as well. Like whenever I've like say gone to life drawing class or I've done something like really creative, and I'm like, oh, why did I do that bit? I wish I'd done it like this. And by that point, it's too late because marks have already been made on the paper or whatever. And then it's almost like just letting that go because it's part of the process of the final product.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's something to get used to when you're working with. So, like most of my video is with people. That's what I most enjoy doing. And if I was to kind of niche down a little bit more, it would be into getting people on camera who aren't usually on camera and getting the best out of them. And when you're doing that, obviously and likewise with documentary as well. You really don't have that much control. You kind of gather the raw materials from the person and that's what they're saying. You can do what you can to get the best out of them. But there's some people you're just not going to be able to get anything that amazing out of, or you are going to get something amazing, but it's not the amazing thing you thought you were going to get, and suddenly all of your best laid plans are out the window. But you've got something new to do and something new to work with. I did a job for a IFA firm, like an independent financial advice firm. It was basically this really lovely guy down in Cardiff and his team, basically. That was so much fun working with them because he wanted to do like a getting to know the team video. It's kind of like 4 minutes, 5 minutes, each of them being interviewed and then cutting together all the best bits, basically. And each one of them was just like so different. It was great. You had one who was just like this really fabulous, glamorous woman who was, just fantastic on camera and had clearly been very much looking forward to this. One who was just like absolutely, completely just dreading it. And bless her, she was about to go on maternity leave. And like we were saying, what do you love about working here? And she was clearly just like, well, I love working with the people, but honestly, this was never going to be my passion. And I was like, oh, I can't use any of this. Okay. So I actually ended up saying I'd turned off the camera and doing that little trick where I was like, okay, we're not recording, but that was interesting what you were saying. And we talked for like 15 minutes and then pulled out the old, I'm really sorry, but I told you a little white lie there. We were, in fact, recording the entire thing.
That's a nifty little trick. I'm going to log that.
Yeah, it's really handy. It's really handy. As long as you do it in a fun, cheeky way, and tell them that they can veto anything that they've said there as well,
Yeah.
just so you're not completely tricking them. But 99% of the time, people are like, "Oh, you bastard!" But I like what you've done there. I like what you've done. He's sneaky, but God, he gets results.
I wonder actually if your face-to-face charity work actually helps then you to relax people in that situation as well, because you've dealt with a lot of people all the time, and like essentially we're all got a similar traits, haven't we? We're all human, so you can just go, oh, okay, right, let's be a bit charming, bit cheeky, let's reel you in a bit, and hey presto, you've got something you can use.
Yeah, that's it. It's all about just making people feel that, I guess, in that moment, you're their friend. You've got their back. You're all on the same team. You're not this video guy who's coming in to like put you through the fucking ringer and like, make you sit there until you give us some good goddamn content. No, it's I'm just a guy who's got a camera. We're all working towards the same thing. And I think as well, just making people realize that, it's not the end of the world. I think sometimes creatives can get very, I think particularly on like sets and that kind of thing. Certainly on some sets I've worked on, people can get very, well, I don't know, the way they're acting, you'd think that if this video isn't perfect, then people will die. And just having everybody always bear in mind that actually, it's important that we do a really good job, right? But it's not as important as some other things in the world. Like, at the center of disease control, I get why people might be very stressed and, tempers might fray extremely.
Yeah.
But come on, we're making a video. It's going to get made. It's going to be good in the end. There's no need for anybody to be, shouting or stressing out or anything like that.
Yeah, I think my saying in the similar situation is like, we're not brain surgeons. We're doing something fun. We're doing something like, it should be relatively easy. It's fun. It's like a weird, wonderful job. And like, there's no need to, yes, there's sometimes a lot of money involved, but like, and the client needs to be happy at the end of the day, but that's not really anything stressful, is it really?
No. And getting stressed about it and letting that come across as well. Because of course everybody's been stressed in a set, like, if anybody's ever forgot to press record before, then which every videographer has forgot to press record at some point. We've all been stressed, but I think it's about keeping that in and knowing how to vent that or knowing how to deal with that so that clients and the other people on your set aren't getting infected with your stress.
Yeah.
Such.
And I think
super important.
I think that also comes with age and experience of being on set and stuff, and like also experiencing when the shit hits the fan and hey presto, we're all survived. We all come out the other side. Just a little bit of splattered in shit. It's fine. Like
yeah.
It's
and what's life if you don't get splattered in shit sometimes?
Yeah, exactly. Like part of life. I think that's it's quite a grounded way to kind of look at things. It's same as you. I've had times where I've been so stressed at work and then I've left and gone, why was I so stressed about that? It really didn't matter. Yeah. Like, doesn't
in
matter.
The moment, it does sometimes, and I totally sympathize with people who struggle with, keeping grounded in that situation, because in the moment it can really feel like the end of the world. Like particularly my first 6 months doing it, honestly almost every shoot felt like that. Because I was still learning, and yet I was telling people that I'd made these 2 documentaries and that I was shit hot and exactly what I was doing, because nobody's gonna buy from you unless you have that impression, right? But in my head I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna get found out any minute.
yeah you're like waiting for someone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then after the 6 months, though, I was, I kind of did know what I was doing then, and it all got fine. I feel like as long as everybody makes each mistake once, I think I've made every mistake there is to make in the world of creative videography once, and usually this situation, the feeling that you get as soon as you realise you've made that mistake is so unpleasant that you remember it and don't do it again.
Yeah, I think you're so right, and sometimes you go to make the same mistake again. You're like, oh, hold on, that made me feel like shit. Let's stop.
Yeah.
Let's stop that here. Like,
yeah, we ain't doing that again.
Yeah.
Charge your fucking batteries. That's my advice to every photographer, videographer out there.
Yeah, make sure they're doubly charged.
Yeah.
Get them.
You know that kind of nice battery charging station that you could get off Amazon? Get that.
Yeah.
That's going to be like 50 quid, and it'll be the best 50 quid you've ever spent. It'll give you so much more value than the 3 grand lens.
That's so true. The amount of the amount of times people have been like, quick, can someone just throw this battery on like charge? And you're like in the middle of location and like trying to scramble over C stands and stuff because you're like squeezed into a corner, like this battery's going like flinging everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Where's the SD cards? Where's the SD cards?
Yeah. And they're just down somewhere, floating around because they're tiny little bastards, like just,
Yeah. And in fact, I remember placing them down somewhere 5 minutes ago, but I cannot remember where I've placed them 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, that's something I've definitely had to learn on the job, is being more organized, because I am not a very organized person naturally. And that is actually probably the main thing that I have really had to like have a word with myself about and be like, you really need to get better at this. Like, there are some things that, you can use your own personal kind of like flaws and foibles to your advantage. But I think being basically quite well organized is something that you just have to be.
Yeah.
I run my entire life by the Outlook calendar. Like every single thing I have to do, personal or professional, is in that fucking calendar.
Oh, so what I will say is, I ended up running everything on my phone calendar, and then it went in the toilet, and I then was like, shit, if this doesn't turn back on, I don't know where I'm at next week. So I got a paper diary this year, and my husband looked at it and was like, what in the fuck is going on here? It's got some bits in like green, there's some bits highlighted in pink, there's like bits scribbled out, there's like, because it moves a lot, like my diary moves. Initially, he was like, let's share a digital diary so that I know where you're at. And he just got so pissed off with notifications changing all the time. He was like, no, I can't handle it. Like, he's like, no, I'll just step out of this. You just tell me where you're at that week and that's it. But a paper diary has just saved my bacon. Like,
yeah, I used to do that in briefly between actually working on the street as a fundraiser. I was in back office for a little while, and did have a paper diary then. But you can probably see where this story's going. I lost it. So yeah, that didn't work for me. It has to be something that I'm not otherwise going to lose, but I back up the online calendar.
Yeah.
So there's no chance of any toilet-based mishaps.
Oh God, honestly, I was like, of course. And then literally like 2 days later, my phone like just flew across the studio floor, and I was like, oh Lord, give me strength. Like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, that's why I don't have a nice mobile phone and I have a paper diary. I cannot be trusted.
Yeah. That's something I say about myself, and my partner says about me all the time. You cannot be trusted.
Yeah. I'm like, same.
Yeah, I imagine your husband and my partner would have a great conversation about having to deal with living with a creative and trying to kind of manage the life of a creative. Because I mean, in my head, I manage my life really well, but if I kind of really think about it, I think Becca does a huge amount of managing my life behind the scenes.
I think my husband would probably say I like manage the house quite a bit as well. So he's really good at cooking and I'm good at cleaning. But then if I'm really busy with work and podcast stuff, the cleaning like it stops as I don't live in filth. Let's just clear that up. Like I don't live like Stig of the Dump or something. But it takes a bit of a backseat because I'm like, shit, I've got loads to do. So yeah, I think like he can't handle the fact that my diary changes so much, and that I'd maybe like, for example, today I got a text at 4:45, are you still available tomorrow? And I was like, yeah, cool. So my plan in my head as I was driving home from work was, oh, I'm going to be like off for the day. It's fine. I've got loads to do, blah, blah, blah. And then literally in an instant, as I got in, it changes to like going to work. And he's like, he can't cope with that chopping and changing. And
yeah, I get you, yeah.
Like, I think that feels disorganized to him. But for me, it's organized chaos.
Yes, exactly. It's organized chaos, 100%. Yeah, and I wouldn't have life any other way. Like, I really can't stand anything being predictable, like too far in the future. I hate the idea of knowing what I'm going to be doing in a month and a half. I don't mind having a broad outline of what I might be doing. But, if I really knew that, in 6 weeks' time, you are going to be doing the same thing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and it's going to be basically this, and this. I think that would drive me insane, and I think it did drive me insane when I was younger. Actually, I just didn't realize it.
Yeah, you sound similar to me. Like when I first started styling, I was with a company styling, and I didn't understand why I was feeling so like down and out all the time. And it was literally because I felt penned in. But I see that now
Yeah.
in my mid-30s. I'm like, oh, that's because I felt like I was penned in. Yeah, I'm doing the same kind of work now as what I would have done in my early 20s, but I don't feel penned in because I can say yes or no to it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah, and there's so many other elements to it as well. It's not just the creative side. Like I've been really surprised actually. I don't know how you felt about this being a freelancer, but I've really been surprised that because I always imagined that doing the video would be the good bit, and you also have to do all the shitty business bit around it, but it's just necessary. But what I've actually found is I enjoy the business bit equally, and sometimes honestly, if not more than the video bit. Like I find it really satisfying to do the business development aspect of it, and get kind of think in that kind of strategic way. Like, okay, where do we go now, and what do I need to focus my energy and my time on outside of just delivering a good product and doing the basics of getting enough sales in and getting enough clients in? What else is there to be done? Yeah, it's actually super satisfying, I find. Like, it kind of makes you feel like a master of your own destiny a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think by the sounds of it, you've got more strategy than me. I'm literally like, cool, I've earned some money this month. I hope I earn the same amount next month or a little bit more, whatever. But I think it's interesting, like I've been doing a bit more marketing by myself. So that kind of like having that strategy, I guess, is kind of
Yeah.
been quite cool to kind of see what works on LinkedIn, what doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like a friend of mine was really surprised that I'm even using LinkedIn. She was like, what? I didn't even think like creatives used it that much. And I'm like, I've literally found my tribe now, so it's cool. But it was a bit like, I don't know, going into a sea of Facebook dads really at one point. But I think that kind of side of it, I think I really like. And maybe the strategy to like winning a new client's really fun. I think that
Yeah.
kind of buzz is quite fun. And then like getting your invoices paid on time, that's always nice. Like not having to chase
nice,
and that kind of shit. Yeah.
Yeah, that is nice.
I do find that awkward, like asking people to pay me on time. But longer I am self-employed, the easier it gets. I just kind of put an accountant hat on and just be like, hey, you owe me money.
Yeah, honestly it confused. Like I used to find it super awkward, and I used to almost feel like I was asking too much, which is so weird. But now I look at it like, and I'm genuinely just like, why haven't you paid me? You've agreed to. I've delivered the work. I think it's so bizarre just because I get that bigger companies particularly have accounting departments that have to do all their stuff as well. But with like smaller operations, it really confuses me when people don't pay quickly, because it's not like you're delivering a chest of gold doubloons across the Atlantic Ocean in a chest. You're pressing a button on your phone, pretty much. Like, so when people are like, oh no, I've been really busy, I'll get that paid this week. I find it really hard to bite my tongue and not just be like, I'll just do it now, 30 seconds. You do it instantly.
Yeah,
It's a wonderful thing called online banking.
Yeah, and it's magic. It's on your phone.
Yeah, it's really impressive stuff.
Yeah, I think that's difficult. It's like often I'll word things like, please could it be in my account by the end of day Wednesday, end of day Thursday, whatever. And I think like often then people go like, oh shit, yeah. Otherwise you just, I don't know, I become a like Karen, and I'm like nag and nag and nag. And then they get pissed off because I'm nagging, and I'm like, just pay me.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something you've got to do as a bit of an internal battle. Like, I also feel like a complete Karen, but I think we shouldn't. Like, all we're asking for is what we agreed, and it's just basic professionalism, really.
Yeah.
And I also think that people far more feel that they can do it to freelancers than almost anybody else, because I think there's this general, not necessarily incorrect perception that freelancers need the clients, and a lot of us do live paycheck to paycheck, and every client, sometimes you look back and think, man, if even like 2 of them clients hadn't come in, I'd have been really up the creek. And I think people are kind of aware of that, and I think if people are just a little bit, I'm unscrupulous maybe isn't the right word, but maybe just a little bit less considerate of how what they're doing affects the other people they're interacting with. Put it that way. Which is fine. Everybody does it sometimes. I think people do feel like they can take the piss a little bit sometimes.
And I think they go, Yeah, I think they go, oh, you're creative, so like you must be heads in the clouds, like willy-nilly. Doesn't matter. Like, oh, you've got XYZ, so you should be fine. Like, no, my cash flow is like important, and like, if somebody doesn't pay me, so right, it might be 200 quid or it might be 500 quid, but that month, that £200 could mean as much as a £500 invoice being paid, And like, regardless of what it appears that people have, they still need paying for the time that they've worked on stuff. And I think sometimes some freelancers are a little bit more relaxed in getting paid. And like, I'm like, great for you that you've got backup money, but like maybe the cost of living is, squishing some of us like a snail under a trainer, And
Yeah.
I think it's really important. I think also I kind of got the confidence that if people don't pay me on time by like 3 times, I'm like, cool, go find someone else to work for you, because I can't afford to have that cash flow. I told you she'd shake, didn't I?
Oh, hello.
You can't, not everybody can have that gap in their cash flow. It's just not always feasible, and I think you're right. It's kind of not being ignorant to other people's needs. And
Yeah.
often when people pay you within like 2 weeks, I'm like, when do you need me next? Because I am going to be there, and I'll be there early, and I'll bring biscuits and like,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for every client who doesn't pay on time and is a bit of a nightmare about it, you've got 4 or 5 who are fantastic, and
Yeah.
you really want to do the best for them because they've done the best for you. And
Yeah.
it's, you can call it a business relationship, but ultimately it's just a human relationship, like any other. And if they've shown you that consideration and respect, you want to do the absolute shit hot best job you can for them as well. Yeah, and then likewise, if people treat you kind of like crap, you're not going to do your best work for them. Like,
No.
I mean, it sounds a little bit unprofessional to say sorry, clients, but like, it's just a human thing. You're not going to go that extra mile. Like, nobody does. No one's superhuman, and you're going to do. Ultimately, we only have so much time, and you're only going to spend that time. You're going to spend it on the people who you feel like respect you and have given you that consideration.
So before we press record, you spoke to me to say that you were on the other side of the camera recently doing a brand shoot in one of the cafes in the Northern Quarter. Tell me how it felt to be on the other side.
So at first it was really strange because we started off in a studio and then we went to this cafe. And at first it was really strange because I'd worked with this photographer on a shoot before. Yeah, she was photographing while I was videoing, basically. And yeah, she was great. And I knew that she was the one I wanted to use. We'd got on super well. And we were both like setting up the lights together. And I had like camera gear to kind of pose with and that kind of thing as like props. So we're kind of getting all that ready, and then there's this like disconnect in my mind where I was like, okay, this is the bit where I then like tell the talent what to do, but I'm that now. That's interesting. So I like stood there, and thankfully she was super good. I basically just said, tell me what to do. I'll do anything. Like, I'm not shy on camera or anything. I just need you to actually tell me what to do. And she did. It was fantastic. And after like a minute of throwing shapes with my face, kind of, emoting all these different emotions. Yeah, it was super good fun, actually. I really got into it. But I think that was so down to the quality of the photographer I was working with. And yeah, the results, we've not got the results yet. I've had like 4 of the images back, like raw. I don't think they've been edited, but they look fantastic. And yeah, I'm really confident in the results we're going to get as well. But yeah, actually being in front of the camera was super fun. I quite like it. I mean, maybe you can tell from me being on this podcast, I actually quite enjoy I don't mind a bit of public speaking and that kind of thing as well. So yeah, actually doing the shoot was great, and I think it's also just nice to see yourself in that kind of like, when you spend your whole time making other people look really good in front of a camera and doing the editing to make them look great, and so they're gonna look at themselves and think, hey, awesome, I like how I look there. It's nice to have someone do that for you, even outside of it was for a business purpose, obviously, but I think even in just a personal sense, it's just really nice to spend that money and time on yourself and have a few pictures of yourself, which we're not just like grinning like a lunatic or caught mid drink or mid falling over or whatever, like most pictures that get taken. So yeah, overall, I would highly recommend the experience. Get a brand shoot done, guys. It's great.
Yeah, I think like yours and my friends that I was telling you about, that I can probably say because of when this will go out, but basically she asked me to help her carry a bright pink Chesterfield chair up onto Marsden Moor, and it was for her brand. And I was like, this just looks like so much fun. We were just like not mucking about, but like mucking about. Do you know what I mean? Like nothing was too serious. It was like she knew what she wanted to get across. And like, I thought actually maybe I just need a couple of hours of like, because it's always just, I think the picture on LinkedIn at the moment is me. Oh, that was it. I was in a studio that had continuous lighting and I was like, looks pretty good here. Ding, on my phone, like on the shittest phone, because as we know, I drop them everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a nice picture, but like it could be better. I've got plenty of photographer friends. I should probably just reach out and be like, guys, can somebody just take a portrait of me real quick?
Oh, go for it. You'll have a great time. You'll love the result. I would highly recommend it. And I think what you said there about it being just something very like casual and just fun and not like super serious and structured is really important. So for the second part of the shoot when we went to that cafe, I got my partner Becca to come along and a friend came, and actually funnily enough I saw a couple of guys that I knew from something ages ago just in the cafe, and they asked what we were doing, so they were up for participating, and we got a bunch of shots that were like them around the table and pretending to be clients and stuff.
Cool.
And then we also got so the photographer actually came up with his idea because it was partially for Racoon on the Run, it was partially for a new brand that's going to be kind of a platform for freelancers, quite actually focused on getting freelancers a better deal in life in general. And she said, why don't we? We've got all these bits of like A3 paper and all these marker pens. Why don't we make some protest signs? We've got like an hour left. Why don't we make some protest signs, go outside and like hold them up, like pay your freelancers on time, don't ghost freelancers, etc. And I was just like, oh my God, that's so good. That's such a good idea. That's like, they are going to be some of the best shots of the entire thing. And I think because it was that kind of shoot and that kind of environment where everybody felt comfortable to just be like, hey, should we do this? Should we try this? Should we try that? Without any fear of like, oh no, but actually we've got a schedule to stick to, or actually we've got very specific plans for this and a shot list and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it really was just kind of quite free flowing. We ended up with probably, like, I suspect that them photos business wise are probably going to be the most useful ones of the entire thing, because I don't particularly think that my profile picture on LinkedIn is going to have an enormous effect on any of my business. I'm sure it'll have some effect, like cumulatively with all the other stuff that you do for your branding. But I actually think some of them ones with like the protest signs, they just communicate the new brand so well, and like the message and kind of the vibe of it really well and all that kind of thing. And that came from literally just a spitballed idea being thrown out and everybody running with it. Yeah,
I think that's where the best ideas come from. Is that somebody just goes ping and you literally run with it.
Yeah. And you know, sometimes it's can be the daftest thing that provokes you. Like sometimes, you know, you'll be on a set and there'll be, you know, a particularly large number of houseplants there for some reason. And it's like, should we go for a bit of like a lush jungly thing here? We weren't really planning that, but how would you feel about that? Should we do that as a backdrop? And you know, that kind of thing. And you know, if you know, I've had it where, you know, you're shooting in somebody's home or something, and the dog's there, and it's like, would you be up for including the dog? People love dogs. Dogs on video really work.
Yeah,
they can be a nightmare, but we've got the time. You know, you've got me for the whole day. If you think that could work as part of your brand and there's something that pulls people in, let's do it. And you just do it. That's the great thing, isn't it, about freelancing? You know, you're not thinking, will my manager like this? I wasn't really instructed to do this by my manager back in the office. Yeah. It's like, I am the manager. If the client likes it, if I like it, then why not? Let's do it.
So can you tell me about this secret freelance platform that you've got in the pipeline?
I can. Let's do it. Yeah. Since this is going to be going out in a few months, I can. Yeah. This is actually technically going to be the first time I've ever spoke publicly about it. So that's very.
Oh, that's exciting.
Ooh, I know. So it started off. It's been rattling around my head since about March kind of time, and it started because I had a string of just like 2 clients who just when like not paying on time, and also were doing that thing where they were like being extremely demanding in like scope, with like scope creep and stuff, being like, oh, can we just do this? Can we just do this? Can we just do this? And I'm like, well, yeah, that's also going to be an extra charge, and you've not even paid me for the first thing yet. So let's settle down. And you know, I obviously you remain professional the whole time, but internally I really felt pretty like disrespected and you know, like kind of crappy about it. And you know, you don't want other freelancers to have that experience. So I googled, can I review my clients? which is not a thing. That is not a thing that you can do, but it is going to be soon. So it's a membership-based platform, is the idea. So it started off as just a review platform. So you sign up for X amount per month, £6-7 a month it's going to be. Sorry if it's more expensive than that now it's actually developed, but I think it's probably going to be around there. We want it to be super affordable. And it's going to be super verified so that nobody but freelancers can see it. So it'll be verified via your social media, by your website. It'll actually be people verifying it as well, so there's no chance that this can have any blowback.
Yeah.
And you can essentially, it's like Glassdoor for freelancers, really. You can write about your experiences with different businesses. And, sometimes occasionally, that might be, do not work with these people, they're horrible. That's going to be very, 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 very rare, though, I think. I think the vast majority, the majority, I think, are going to be, work with these people, they're awesome. And then there's going to be some of them that work with these people, they're great. However, just be aware, X, Y, Z. And, it means that, if you find out that they're going to be late payers, it doesn't mean you don't work with them. But it maybe means that rather than booking that holiday at the end of the month because you're going to be able to pay your rent from their invoice, hold off on booking the holiday for a second. Just make sure they do pay the invoice before you spend your rent money on a holiday. Or, if you think there's going to be a lot of scope creep, really make sure you've highlighted that bit of your terms and conditions about what extra work entails. And just little ways that you can modify how you onboard somebody or how you work with somebody to avoid them awkward situations that come down the line. And so that's kind of the main thing of it. All kind of really anonymous as well. We can obviously see at the back end, just so we don't get anybody going on just bad mouthing everybody. I think if we get a freelancer on and every single review they leave is just like, these people are terrible, you have to question, are you just terrible?
Yeah.
It's
maybe
not
you're
about,
the arsehole.
Yeah, maybe it's you. Maybe the client's terrible and it's probably you. Obviously it needs to be fair on clients as well. But overall, it's for freelancers. It's called Freelance Fightback. That's what we're calling it. And it's kind of expanded out since then. So where we're at now, it's kind of the end of August 2024. And am I allowed to say that? Yeah, okay. We're not losing a sense of continuity or anything.
No, you're fine.
Okay, good stuff. Yeah, and it's kind of expanded out since then. So I've hooked up with a couple of investment matchmakers who have got me potential investors. We're just in the process of building the pitch deck at the minute and getting it really, really good and fiery and exactly where it needs to be. And it's also expanded generally into a bit of a community platform as well, because they kind of brought this up. They said, okay, if you're going to get freelancers on a membership for this, is there more that you could offer as well? Yeah. And I said, well, actually, yeah, there is, because LinkedIn's great. I've really fallen in love with LinkedIn. I've become a LinkedIn person, which I never thought I'd say.
You and me both.
Oh, right. It's just the best.
Yeah.
And people have. I've got one other friend that uses it, but all of my other friends are like, they're not in that sort of business at all, and they find me very funny and quite cringy, to be honest, but I don't care. I am quite funny and cringy, whatever. And I think as a freelancer on LinkedIn, though, you're always trying to balance talking to potential clients and using it in that way and talking to your peers and your buddies in freelance and in business, and sometimes those two things kind of butt heads a little bit, and they're not always mutually beneficial. So I think also Freelance Fightback, it definitely is going to be kind of a social platform as well for freelancers to, as I've been phrasing it to people, for freelancers to let it all hang out. Where you don't have to be this perfect version that you're trying to present to clients. You can talk shit. You can talk about the ugly side of it. Talk about your failures. Talk about your successes. Brag, whatever. It's only other freelancers there, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I think a lot of us have peer-to-peer conversation outside of a social media platform about clients who don't pay or frustrations and stuff.
Since COVID as well, there's been a general thing amongst employees and self-employed people of kind of realizing that the economy isn't really working for everybody. It's working very well for the people at the top, but it's not really working that well for everybody else. People are having to work longer hours for less money. Gone are the days where somebody, on a minimum wage could support a family and two kids, which was the whole idea in the first place. That's completely gone now. That's laughable these days. And I think there has, in the kind of like employed space, there's been a bit of a backlash against that. People call it quiet quitting.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in a more positive sense, there's also been an uptick in union membership as well, which I personally think is awesome. I think everybody who's employed should be in a union. I think it's really important. Collective bargaining is ultimately how we have things like weekends and maternity leave and all that kind of important stuff. But freelancers can't really do that. I don't know what freelancers going on strike would even look like. It's not a thing. Yeah.
I was just going to say, and there is a couple of unions, but then sometimes some of the unions, and this is from years ago when I was looking at one of them, are run by some of the scrupulous people who own photography companies. And you're like, that union's not going to get me very far.
Yeah. And I think even the good ones sometimes are all about kind of like the individual action and like, we can help you with this individual case, which is great, but it doesn't have that same sense of like letting people in general know that don't fuck with freelancers, basically. And I do hope that in a general sense, I'm dreaming big here, but I do hope that in a general sense, in 5-10 years time, if this platform is a success, people will know that actually you do need to pay on time. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time finding people to work for you. Freelancers actually do talk now, and there is actually a platform where people can warn each other about that. Yeah, so I really do hope that it kind of takes off and works and people run with it, because I think the freelance space is well overdue some way of tackling an issue that is a huge issue for a lot of creative freelancers, I think.
Yeah, and also like having a space, like you say, away from clients to have that private conversation, because as well, we're also distanced now because of COVID, where we couldn't be any more connected, but physically we're very distanced. And I think like having something like that where you can go, oh, thank God it's not just me.
That's it. Yeah.
It just makes you feel less alone. And I definitely find this from the podcast. The more I chat to people, like we were chatting about imposter syndrome, the more you chat to everybody still feels the same, but it's difficult to say it. And especially say on LinkedIn, that's difficult to say, oh, well, I feel like this. Because then not just a peer, like a client might be like, oh, who the fuck is she?
Yeah, I'm not going to work with somebody who feels like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to work with that guy who's saying, I feel shit hot constantly. I feel amazing all the time.
Yeah. And like both are equally a lie. You don't always feel shit and you don't always feel fucking amazing either. But yeah, I even triple checked what I wrote the other day on LinkedIn. I think I posted about like silly things I'd done as a stylist, like pricking my finger with a pin, tripping over a C-stand and stuff, just to kind of like normalize that like people are clumsy, and like also you got to try and squeeze yourself onto a set without knocking a polyboard over with your ass, which happens to me all the time. But I think like then I was like double reading it like, oh God, I'm going to have to put that I've got insurance as well, which I do, but just to make sure that clients think like, oh, she's not going to come in and fucking trash the place.
Yeah. Who is this whirlwind person who just comes and destroys sets all the time?
Yeah, like a literal bull in a china shop. Like, what the hell? But I do think that it sounds such a good idea. And I think like you're right, as long as it's being vetted and it's not one negative Nelly just being a negative Nelly for everything. And I think it's really nice that it's got positive reviews as well, and it maybe will help people out so then they're not stuck in a sticky situation, or that they're more aware that say somebody doesn't pay you on time but the work's nice, sometimes there's a trade-off. And I think it's like nice to have a public platform to say that, rather than, oh, so-and-so says that so-and-so, you shouldn't work with so-and-so because XYZ, or, and like it's almost like Chinese whispers.
Exactly.
And, is it actually true? Was that person who said that actually an arsehole and demanded payment 3 minutes after they sent their invoice? Like...
Yeah.
There's lots of nuances.
If like 3 people are saying the same thing, then there's a decent chance it might be true.
Yeah.
And I think just generally, just knowing that there's other people in your corner as well. Because it'd be really nice as a way to kind of, even share how do others deal with this situation and that kind of thing. because the other pillar of it as well is eventually want to kind of have like a resource library for freelancers, particularly newer freelancers, because this is something that I really didn't have any idea about for ages. About things like, building a contract, building your T&Cs, that kind of thing, how to do all that kind of stuff that you just don't think about,
Yeah.
like what insurance you actually need,
Oh yeah,
and what
and
level of
like
insurance you need, and that kind of
yeah,
thing.
and like especially for you've hit a nail on the head with me because stylists, right? So my insurance is specifically written for me by Hiscox. I will shout them out because every time I ring them and I'm like, "Oh, I'm just double checking that my insurance is right, blah blah blah," and they're like, "Yeah, we've like written it for you. This is covered from this bit, and we've poached this bit." They have been fantastic, but I literally had to find them through like quizzing loads of people, like who's yours with, and then like sitting on the phone for an hour trying to explain my job over the phone to someone who like is very corporate and doesn't understand. But also then for them to nail it on the head
Yeah.
was just like incredible.
Yeah, I use them as well actually, and
Yeah,
they didn't do it as bespoke for me, but I have found them to be really good as well.
yeah.
Yeah,
They were
shout out
so
Hiscox. Woo.
yeah. I was like yes, and they're not expensive either. Like
No, really not.
I think mine's like 18 or 16 pounds a month. I don't think it's a lot of money.
Yeah, I think mine's around 40 or something. But
Yeah,
I've also got
you
tons of
got
equipment
equipment. Yeah,
insured. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's really reasonable.
Yeah, I was like, this is really good. Like, but again, I didn't know I needed it until someone was like, here's your T's and C's for coming on boarding. And I was like, oh shit, I need insurance. Like, fuck,
Yeah, yeah,
you
right.
know,
Yeah,
because you don't think it's not something that you first think of that you'll need.
yeah.
And actually, like, I've never needed, touch wood, never needed to actually use it. But like, that peace of mind for under 20 quid a month
Oh
is
yeah,
great.
so worth it. Hey, so worth it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. I think because stuff like that does exist. There is that kind of help out there, but it's not always the most obvious way you'll get it.
yeah,
It's also not always freelancer specific. I think a lot of the time it's people starting small businesses generally, whereas actually there's so much stuff to do with being a freelancer that is quite specific to it, that's not
yeah,
tailored to it. And I also just think the format it's done in is quite often really kind of old school and corporate. Like some of the resource banks I've looked at from a few different organizations are really just kind of look like they were kind of built in like 2005 or something. I just don't think they appeal to like the kind of like young person who's maybe a couple of years out of uni is just getting into freelancing. They're looking at maybe some of these websites and thinking, what the hell's this? This looks like some retiree made it or
yeah,
something,
yeah, yeah.
and they're not going to end up using it then.
No.
Whereas I think just to repackage it in a way that's like actually speaks to the people who are going to be using it, yes, obviously just going to be super important.
Yeah, and I think then you can start adding lists of people like, which is really boring, but we all need them, like accountants or accountancy software that people use, and like all this other stuff that people get in a muddle with, like myself included. When I first started, I was like, oh my God, I've got to do spreadsheets and I've got to do this. And like, there wasn't such things as Sage and QuickBooks when I first started. But now there is, and they're absolutely fucking great. And they
Yeah,
make life so much easier. And then getting an accountant on top of that, you're like, cool, this is amazing. Like,
yeah, yeah,
I don't have to think, like the accountant can deal with it. Great.
yeah,
But it's like, you're right. It's important to have all these resources lists out there. And it shouldn't be like hidden. It shouldn't be like, oh well, I'm not telling you because
yeah, yeah,
like
100%.
they're all there to help each other. And then if you recommend, like, say if I recommended you my accountant, he might knock 50 quid off my bill because I've recommended him someone else. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah,
just
exactly. Yeah, I think in general, like freelancers, and I think people in general as well, to be honest, but freelancers specifically, are so often the type of people who really want to collaborate and help other people out and give people a leg up in the industry. I don't think there are many of us who see people new to the industry as like competition and like, oh, we want to dominate this industry, because I just don't think it attracts that sort of person generally, the creative space or the freelance space really. So just making it easier to do that is
yeah,
just very nice. Yeah, like this podcast, for example. Like I've looked through a few similar podcasts that are aimed at self-employed people, freelancers, creatives, and I think it's so nice to have these as something you can stick on and be like, it's that thing, isn't it, of going, oh yeah, I get that. Yeah, I felt that as well. I thought I was the only one, like the imposter syndrome thing. Being
Yeah.
able to go like, oh yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah.
It's
And
so
like,
nice.
I think little pockets of information, the amount I've learned and actually implemented from guests that have been on have like helped my marketing. They've helped like me put up, you probably saw I do like a kind of out of office, like this is my working hours kind of email that pings back to
Yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah.
And like, it's kind of helped me build a sturdier brand for myself. And that's only from opening up and starting the podcast and listening to what other people are doing and being like, oh yeah, that's a good idea, that's a good idea, and just poaching all the things that that see fit to you. And it's really nice that it's able to help. It's something that I've felt like quite passionate about, is like I've wanted to help other people realize they're not on their own, and also like maybe there's some help that within the podcast that can level people up.
Yeah.
And like, it's slightly different to someone shadowing me all day on like set, but it's still helping people run their own businesses and kind of get networked. And the podcast has become a network within itself, and there's people working with each other because they've both been on and connected via LinkedIn or and I think
Oh,
it's really nice,
that's really
right?
nice.
It's
Yeah,
kind
I
of
love that.
like running away with itself. Like
I
who
love
knows?
that. Yeah.
We might end up with a network event at some point. Who knows?
Oh, sign me up.
I put it out to universe. I need some time to organise it.
The Stylish Podcast guest party.
Yeah,
Guest party.
there'd be some expensive flights I'd have to pay for, I think, as well. But I think it's nice when you start a community, and especially when it's people who are kind of like mixed freelancers and they're mixed kind of experience and everything else. I think it's so nice to gather all that knowledge together and kind of cherry pick what suits you. And I think it's great. I think it's great what you're doing, the freelancer fightback. I think it's fantastic.
Thanks, really appreciate that. It's one of them things where it's such a big idea that you think, like, what an asshole. The think that can do that. What an arrogant douchebag that guy is. So to hear other people say, like, actually, that is a really good idea, do roll with it, that is actually very affirming. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's like it could kind of run off with itself as well, and like before you know it, it'd probably end up people working with each other as well, and accessing each other's services, and it's got the projection to be really cool and really integrated, I think. Like,
Yeah, I really hope so, because I just hate any form of kind of atomization in society generally. I think it's like the absolute most poisonous thing in society is how atomized people are generally. And freelancing has so much potential to fall victim to that. And I think the nice thing is that the type of people doing it resist it. Like, with podcasts like this, I don't think we're the type of people that are prone to it. But I would just never want somebody to feel like alone in the freelance world, because I know I definitely did, like we were talking about with the imposter syndrome. And I think even the kind of the term itself has this image of like somebody casting out on their own and forging their own path with no assistance from anybody. And yeah, that's really not what it's about at all, is it?
no.
So yeah, it's really nice that there are so many people doing like similar work as well, and with things like Freelancer magazine and that kind of thing as well. Creating, I think in 10 years' time, hopefully Freelance Fightback will be a part of it. But I think in 10 years' time, 5 years' time, there's going to be this amazing constellation of quite like a cohesive freelance community, particularly geographically bound. I guess it can be hard to do it across international lines. I mean, hopefully there will also be a global freelance community, but I'm thinking kind of in the UK, particularly, there being a really nice community, as we said. I feel like I've said that word so many times it's lost all meaning, but
and you've probably forgotten how to spell it, like
absolutely. Yeah, my mouth like gumming up, and I'm trying to say like, community.
So I've got one last question for you, and answer it however you see fit, and it can be work, life, whichever. But what inspires you?
What inspires me? I'm going to answer it in quite a general sense, if that's all right. So like in a general sense, what really inspires me is anybody in the world who goes out and I'm trying to phrase it in a way that isn't really cliche, and kind of like forges their own path. That there's that side of it, but also kind of sees life as the kind of wild, joyful ride that it is. Like, essentially, the world is a massive playground that if you're lucky, you get around 80, 90 years in. And then as far as I'm aware, that's it. I wish I believed anything else, but as far as I can tell, that seems to be it after that. And anybody just like really kind of runs with that and kind of loves the richness of life. Yeah, the richness of it, the rich tapestry of life. So like somebody, I don't know, somebody like Anthony Bourdain, somebody like that who, really has this hell of a life and is, people who are that super just bright fire that like burns all different colors throughout their life. They're doing different things. They're doing that with like an enormous amount of passion, making sure that everybody else around them also is kind of doing that and have that infectious energy. Like my dad was very much that kind of guy. He went on a lot of holidays, but he was also very quite like a small town guy as well. But he really kind of experienced a lot of things, whether that was from always making me try different food as a kid to trying different hobbies. I mean, this is a guy who once built an enormous fish tank in his garden.
Amazing.
Don't even ask. But built a hovercraft once, built a robot for Robot Wars. We didn't get in, unfortunately, but did build a robot for Robot Wars.
That's so cool.
Yeah, exactly. Just people who see things and just go, that's cool. Let's try that. Let's try that. And then, sometimes you'll always have people sat there going, well, I don't think you can do that. Like, I don't think that's something that you're going to be able to do. Or like, what right do you have to do that? What experience do you have that says you'd be able to do that? And I think, you've got to look at those people who've said to those people, well, screw that. I'm just going to do it anyway. Let's do it anyway. See what happens. And even if you completely fuck it up and it's a massive failure, then you've learned something along the way. You'll probably have quite a good time. You'll probably meet some exciting people. It'll probably put you onto your next thing. So I think just that general sense of like running with something and getting an idea and just doing it no matter what, going crazy with it.
I really like that. It sounds like your dad inspires you quite a lot as well, and just kind of, it sounds like you've got a bit of his personality with your just going for it sense of like living life, and that's really nice. I think like, why not? Life's too fucking short, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Like, you want to, there's a great, we mentioned Hunter Thompson in our little pre-recording chat. Hunter S. Thompson, did we?
Yeah, I think so. We have definitely mentioned him.
We have definitely mentioned him, haven't we? Yeah, I'm not imagining that. And he has this quote, he had a lot of flaws as a person, but he has this like really amazing quote that's, I want to come over the finish line. I don't want to arrive over the finish line, all nicely done up and kind of looking neat still. I want to run over like with my arm like hanging off and like totally fucked up and ugly and my clothes hanging off me and like barely even, recognizable as human anymore, and just be like, wow, what a ride that was, hey. And I think that is, the number one thing to live by.
I agree. Like, no matter which way you look at it, you should be enjoying life, like however you see fit. And that's so right. Like, you shouldn't be recognizable near the end. You should be like, oh, laying on your deathbed should be like, no regrets, just like, do you remember when I did that really fucking mental thing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
A year ago.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's exactly it. Remember when I decided to become a freelancer? That was weird, wasn't it? Who'd have thunk it?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to know you and hearing all about your Racoon on the Run business and your Freelancers Fight Back business that's going to be booming. I tell you, that's like chef's kiss. Can't wait for that to come out. Oh, yes.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me. I've had an absolute riot. Yeah, it's been great.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please rate, follow and share, as it really helps this little podcast out. And if you have found value in the podcast and you have the means to, I do have a Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. This will help keep the podcast going. Join me next week for another fantastic guest. Bye!